How many hallucinations are we talking about? All right. Well, the group delusion is not going to account for Paul and James. Paul's a multimodal hallucination. Okay. James is like, we'll just say it's visual. So that means, and then we've got Peter, who's the crazy guy that's going to delude the rest of the apostles. So you're looking at 3 hallucinations. Okay, so like 2 of them are multimodal. You've got Peter and Paul are multimodal, and then you've got James, who's unimodal and just visual. Okay, so like, you're looking at 0.008 times 0.008 times 0.07. Okay, but here we go with the combo theories, because that doesn't explain everything. You've got to explain why the rest of the apostles believed it and were willing to put their lives on the line and stuff. So like, you got to do a combo theory. So you got to ask, like, okay, what are the odds that, like, if you pick, Peter random out of the population, what are the odds that he'll hallucinate? And what are the odds that James will? And what are the odds that Paul will? And also, what are the odds that this group of people will be, in this group delusion? The rest of the people who were just deluded. Well, we don't have odds for that. And then there's that empty tomb. The empty tomb. So like, what, given that with the empty tomb is a known thing, like, what are the odds that the tomb would be empty? How many tombs get robbed? Like what are the odds that Peter would pull off this group delusion? And then there's a question of, like, what happened to the story of, like, someone like Judas, like, that doubted. Like, so Peter's got to convince the other apostles that they witnessed Jesus back from the dead too. He's probably going to fail a little bit. He's not going to have 100% like convince rate. That's probably a hallucination. Like, they were like, they were like way gone. Like, but anyway, so anyway, and then what? How many tombs go empty exactly? Given that that's a well-supported historical fact. All right, so like, where's the story? This is another absence of evidence for the story of, like, the apostle of Jesus that Peter tried to convince, and he left the cult, that kind of thing. I mean, you've got people like Ananias and Sapphira later in Acts who seem to be not fully on board with the Christian thing, but like they weren't entirely against it, but like they're not witnesses to the resurrection. He only appeared to certain ones, so like you don't have the story of like Peter trying to convince all these people, and there were some people he couldn't convince that they had seen Jesus. You get this 100% rate, so that's a problem. There's still that empty tomb. So but we gotta think, how common are group delusions? I mean, yeah, cults exist, they make the news, but like out of 100 people, how common is it that like out of how many, out of 100 people, how common is it? How common are empty tombs? Out of every 100 graves, how common are empty graves? Okay, so, and then there's this question that we haven't even addressed. It's not just that, these, like, James, Peter, and Paul experienced hallucinations at some point in their life. They experienced relevantly similar hallucinations all around this same period regarding the same subject matter. That's a whole other question that we're not even addressing. When it comes to the group delusion, though, I mean, that makes sense, because it's like, well, that's how group delusions work. They have to be focused on the same thing. But hallucinations in general, it's like, why would they, Alright, so if we multiply 0.07 for James times 0.008 for Peter and 0.008 for Paul, we get 0.0000448. Okay? So then, what if we combine that with like a 49% chance for the group delusion? we'll say that 49 out of every 100 people get group diluted into a cult. Okay? Well, that puts us at there's a 1 in 500,000 chance of that occurring. If we give this massive percentage, okay, and then let's say that 49 out of every 100 graves go empty, then we get a 1 in 1 million chance. 1 in 1 million chance of this all occurring. Of 2 multimodal hallucinations, of 1 visual hallucination, of the group delusion that we just gave it this huge number of 49% odds. And then this empty tomb, we give it 49%. We get 1 in 1 million odds. Okay? But realistically, it's not like 49 out of every 100 graves go empty. It's not like 49 out of every 100 people join a group deluded cult and commit suicide to go up to the comet. It doesn't work like that. Okay? Let's just say it's 1%, which is actually really high. It's way lower than that. The research I read on this is just that group psychosis is just rare. It's just rare. You know, it's not like multimodal hallucinations, or something like that. It's like probably lower, probably much lower. Okay? But let's just be generous and say it's 1%, not as generous as 49. And let's say that 1% of graves go empty, which we know it's less than that. And we know that it's less than that for group delusions. Okay? Now what do we get? Alright? Realistically, we could 0.8 and 1% are pretty close. Like, we could just bump Peter up to 0.8. If you would just to be nice. Like, what are we going to get when we do 0.01 times 0.01, or times 0.008, times 0.07 for James. Alright, and that realistically, that's being super generous. Like, how many people get group deluded? How many people join group deluded cults like that? Delusion is a fixed false belief where, like, there's, like I read about with their stories, like, these people are willing to die for this. This was like, they would have been severely deluded. Okay, so, like, honestly, it's way less than 1 out of every 100 people. And honestly, it's way less than 1 out of every 100 graves. But, so, like, doing that math, alright? So let's just do 0.01, alright, times another 0.01 for the group, delusion, times 0.07. And, like, what I'm doing there is I'm lumping all of the other disciples. The group delusion needs, like, one person to, like, lead the other people into it. So we got Paul at 0.008. We've got James at 0.07. We've got the group that Peter deluded at 0.01, which is incredibly generous. And we've got Peter at 0.01, which is generous. And then what about the empty grave? We'll give that 0.01, which is ridiculously generous. We get a... Let's see. Oh my goodness, 5, or we'll say 6 out of, what's a 1 with 10 zeros after it? 10 billion. 6 in 10 billion chance. So 6 in 10 billion. So let's see, 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 divided by 6 equals 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So it's like a 1 in 2 million odds. Okay, so hopefully you get, like, what's going on. I probably botched the math, but, like, realistically, it's probably Peter at 0.008. So we'll do Peter at 0.008, and then we got Paul. Well, no, I did Peter at 0.08, and then Paul at 0.008, and then Oh man, I keep typing in wrong. Paul at 0.008, and then James at 0.07, and then 0.01, and then times 0.01. Yeah, that's like 4 out of 10 billion, or 1 in. Oh yeah. Not 4 out of 10 billion. It's 4 out of 10 million, or 1 in 2.5 million. Yep. So. All right. So, if I'm doing that right, it's a 1 with 8 zeros after it is 10 million. Yeah. But like realistically, it's probably lower, because like I was being super generous, and you can see how these numbers work out. Like if we do that differently, so 0.008 times 0.008 times 0.07 times, we'll just say 0.01, and we'll cut that one of the other ones like empty graves. Let's say that 0.005. Okay, now we're looking at 2 out of, it's almost a trillion. We're out of 100 million. So 2 out of 500 million odds. And realistically, like if we do 0.008 times 0.008 times 0.07, and then if we do realistically times 0.05 times 0.05, where 0.05 and 0.05, oh no, 0.005 times 0.005, where those represent you see what I mean? Like the numbers get really low. And so the problem with combo theories is that, and that's why, you don't want to, what you want is a theory for what happened that it just is one thing. Like it would be nice if we just said like, okay, Peter hallucinated and that explains the whole thing. So like, Peter hallucinated, and that explains the whole thing. Like that's what happened. So like that would just be like a little bit less than 1% chance. So it's not that bad. But like if you start saying these other unlikely events all occurred together simultaneously, then you get when it's Peter and Paul and James and the other apostles. They're all claiming to have seen something. And, it's not like... So if you compare it to, say, like, the Moonies cult, Sung Young Moon, maybe he hallucinated, and then he deluded the group, but he didn't delude them like this, like we're talking about. Like that's rare. That doesn't happen all the time. For most of the time, that doesn't happen. It happens, but most of the time, it doesn't happen. And then you've got to combine it with like other people having the similar hallucinations, and then you've got to combine it with what happened to that grave, and like you get something that's very unlikely. So what you run into, and this is the final thing we'll say, what you run into with atheists on this is like, well, anything's more likely than a miracle. And that's where we run into trouble, like, like the odds are really low here. Like that's why I call these medical miracles. Like we'd have to believe something that is incredibly unlikely. Like, like for example with the Moonies cult, no one appears willing to die for their belief in this. Maybe they're deluded, but they're not deluded on that level. Like that kind of delusion is rare. Like for example with the Jonestown cult, where they all committed suicide, a lot of those people were forced and tried to get away, but like they didn't have a choice. So, and a lot of people left that thing, and no one claimed to like see Jim Jones back from the dead or anything like that. So anyway, that's where this goes. You know, there's this question of like, okay, but it's a miracle, so it didn't happen. And that goes back to that philosophical question about the probability of the resurrection or the probability of miracles. And so we talked about that in a whole other video. So at this point, I'm just going to stop and hope that I said everything well, and we'll just move on. Thank you. Have a good day.